Hey guys, Luke here, and whenever you talk about teams that have been dominant, you always talk about teams that, who's been the most dominant over the last 10 years. Now, obviously, there's some teams that you immediately jump to, your Storms, your Roosters, those sort of teams, and then some that you will completely go absolutely nowhere near, looking at you Titans. But up until now, we never really know who's really actually been the best team in terms of wins and losses and that sort of stuff. We know the Roosters have been good, quite good the last few years. We know in 2013 they won, but I mean, were they consistent throughout all those years? Same with Melbourne Storm, same with Manly, a few others. Who was the most consistent? But thanks to Fox Sports, we can now answer who officially is the best team of the last 10 years. Now, Fox has gone through and they've compiled a table with wins and losses, 400 games and points, and they've done 1 to 16. So let's take a look at the ladder. So you can see on the screen right now, there is the ladder. At number 1 spot, we have the Melbourne Storm. No real surprises there. In second spot, the Sydney Roosters as well. To my shock, Brisbane in at third. I know Broncos have been kind of consistent. They never really missed the 8. So, I mean, it's not a shock to see them in the 8. However, them as high as third, that is a bit of a shock. South Sydney in 4. I thought they'd be a little bit higher. To be honest with you, I thought they might have been in a third. We then have Manly, North Queensland, Canterbury, Penrith, Cronulla, St. George, Canberra, Warriors, Tigers, Parramatta, Gold Coast, and the wooden spoon is the Newcastle Knights. Now, I'm not going to lie, because of the last few years, because the Knights have actually been half decent. Now, they haven't made the 8, but they definitely haven't been the worst team, but you kind of forget how bad things were at the Knights. I mean, was it 3 wooden spoons in a row? I mean, the Eels also had a period through this time where they were pretty dreadful. However, they sort of had that time, and they also spent time in the top 4 and in and amongst around the top 8 a few times, where the Knights, they just haven't made the top 8 at all. So it's been pretty dreadful for the Knights. However, they did have that little run where they made it to the final 4. I think it was in 2013 actually, but I think this is just, I don't know if this is purely going off just regular season games, or if this is going off finals or whatnot. But yeah, the Knights definitely probably the worst team, well, officially the worst team statistics wise. The Titans though, I'm surprised the Titans aren't actually in last as well, because they've just constantly been down the bottom. They haven't really spent too many years in the 8. At least the Knights have had a few seasons in the 8 at the early stages of the 2010s. But yeah, the Titans, I think maybe 2010, 2011, they're up there. But apart from that, I can't really recall too many high appearances for them. Now, I touched on Parramatta just before. We see them in at 14th spot. Now, that's what I was talking about. When they were good, they were good. When they're bad, they're absolutely dreadful. Wooden spoon after wooden spoon after wooden spoon. It was some pretty bad years for Parramatta, and yet they still find themselves above the Titans and the Knights, so that's pretty astonishing for me. But yeah, Jared Hayne, I guess he kind of really carried them, not only in 2009, but in some of the other seasons, to make sure they did not come last on the table. Here's an interesting one though, the West Tigers in at 13. Now, whenever we think of the Tigers, we think of them as being a team that just misses out on the 8, always coming in at 9th. However, we see them here in 13th spot, so maybe they're not as consistent as we think. I mean, they're consistently missing the 8, but in terms of getting that 9th spot and just being outside of the top 8, maybe not so much, maybe only recent years. But yeah, the Tigers a little bit further down than I would have expected, but I mean, in hindsight, I mean, yeah, it's about right. I think 2011 was the only time I can recall them being a real good team, and I mean, that was what, 2 years into this, so yeah, it's a long time ago. In terms of the rest of the ladder though, it's kind of as you would expect. I mean, the Dragons won the Premiership in 2010, so in the first season, they find themselves in a 10th spot. The Raiders obviously have just made the grand final, finished in the top 4. I think they've finished in the top 4 twice in sort of the last 5-6 years. However, they find themselves in an 11th spot. I mean, the Warriors, they're kind of where you would expect them. They're so hot and cold. I'd say Cronulla and Penrith where you'd expect them. The Bulldogs are an interesting one, because I know as a Bulldogs fan, I pay a lot of attention to the Bulldogs, and we had a good portion of that 2010 to 2019 season where we were making the 8. Well, we even came first one year in terms of the ladder. We've always been someone who were pretty good, especially under Des Hasler, in terms of we won more games than we didn't. However, in 2010, 2011, we weren't that great, and then in the last few years, we weren't that great. So the middle period has really saved us. It's been our saving grace. But we'll move on to the Cowboys. They've been another team who I feel like it's in about the right spot. They won a premiership. They've always been a consistent side. They've always been in the 8 or in amongst the 8, pushing the top 4 as well, especially with Thurston there. Now, I know they didn't do too good last year, but for the most part, for all these seasons, obviously, they've been quite consistent. And I actually look at their team this year, and I can see them definitely probably being around 6th spot. So I thought that's kind of cool for them to be there. Manly is an interesting one, 5th position. I thought they would have been a little bit higher. However, the last few years have probably tainted it a little bit. But yeah, they've always been a team, at least contention for a top 4 spot. There's not too many times I can think of them missing the 8. I know it was last year that they nearly got the wooden spoon, so that's probably sort of dragged them down a little bit. All that is, in terms of these positions, I mean, you look at Melbourne, Roosters, Brisbane, South Sydney, not necessarily number one every year. However, they don't really have too many down years where they're right at the bottom. Now, if they have a down year, it's usually them at like 7th or 8th, or something like that. Not in terms of like them dropping all the way down to wooden spoon contention, which is what's happened to Manly, which also happened to the Cowboys as well, which pushed them down. Even the Bulldogs been in contention for the wooden spoon in the last few years. So yeah, that's sort of pushing them further down towards the back end of the ladder. So yeah, it's really a credit to the teams like Melbourne and the Roosters, even the Broncos to a degree. They haven't got a premiership, however, them at 3rd spot. That's a big thing. I mean, you look through all these teams here in the top 8. Here are the teams that have won premierships. Melbourne have won premierships. They won multiple premierships. The Roosters obviously just won back-to-back, also won in 2013. Broncos haven't. They got closest in 2015 when they lost in the grand final. Apart from that, they haven't really been that close. They got to a few grand final qualifiers, but apart from that, haven't really done too much. Then you have South Sydney, who've won a premiership. Manly have also won a premiership. The Bulldogs made 2 grand finals. Penrith, they haven't done it. Obviously, the Cowboys, I just missed them. Actually, they won the premiership, obviously beat the Broncos. But the fact that the Broncos are so high up, including above the Cowboys, and yet they haven't won a premiership is kind of impressive, but also disappointing for Broncos fans, because it shows that they've definitely had the team to do it. They just haven't been able to do it. So, yeah, very frustrating for Broncos fans, I would imagine. And I don't know if things are going to get any better in the upcoming years, but I mean, 3rd position overall, it's not too bad. But yeah, Melbourne and the Roosters just a cut above the rest. I mean, look at the points difference. Melbourne have it by a lot, like 311 to 281. The rest of them, there's usually like a little bit of a cutoff, but yeah, the rest of the ladder, there's like a little bit of a difference, but yeah, that's a big difference between 1st and 2nd. You'd think it'd be a lot closer than what it is, considering the Roosters just went back-to-back. But you got to think Melbourne, in the seasons the Roosters have gone back-to-back, Melbourne still won the minor premiership by a lot, as well as, they've won premierships. They played in the grand final last year. They've always been in amongst it, despite the Roosters' dominance the last few years. So yeah, I suppose that explains why they're so high above everyone else. Although it does say at the bottom here, deducted premiership points for salary cap infringements. So I don't know if the points have been taken into account for, because they do have 29 more wins than the Roosters, which is a lot, especially considering the Roosters did have a few good years early in the early 2010s as well. So yeah, that's class from Melbourne. I think that says it all about Cameron Smith, Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, and also them salary cap roaring it. Okay, that was a joke. Maybe not the salary cap roaring, but definitely a great team. Now, I think it's going to be interesting to see what the next sort of 10 years are going to be like. What's the season 2020 to season 2029 ladder going to look like? I can see the Raiders being a lot higher. I can see a team like Newcastle being a lot higher, as well as Parramatta. But poor teams like the Titans and Warriors and stuff, I can sort of see them sort of staying around the position that they're sort of in. I would love to see the Bulldogs go a lot higher. Actually, you know what? I'll be okay with them at 7th, because that's consistent throughout the whole year. They made the top 8 in the last 10 years, which they haven't done in real life, but they've done it on this ladder. But yeah, I can see Melbourne having a major drop-off. I mean, they've lost half their backline this year. Then you factor in that Cameron Smith, they're probably going to lose arguably the best player of our generation in Cameron Smith, and he's going to be very hard to replace, as well as, I was just talking about Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, going to be losing them as well. It's going to be very hard to replace them. They've kind of replaced the others, but they've been going downhill. I mean, they've been doing well still, but they've gone down, and other teams, I suppose, are getting better. The Roosters, looking at them. But yeah, the Storm not doing as well as what they once were, and I can only see them going a little bit further down the ladder every few years. So I don't think we'll see them in #1 spot. However, I don't know, maybe Craig Bellamy's going to stick around. I saw that he's looking to retire in the next few years, so that'll be a big loss for Melbourne. Maybe as big a loss as Cameron Smith will be, but the Roosters, I feel like the Roosters are always going to be, they're always going to be up there. Politis, he runs the club well, whether it's salary cap sombrero or whether he just is good at man management, I don't really know. But whatever he does, whatever Trent Robinson does, they do a good job, and they always seem to be in amongst things. And if they are, it's only for like one season or whatever, where they're a bit further down, and then they bounce back pretty strongly. Same. Broncos are another one. I can see them slipping. Their team, the Broncos are in 3rd spot, and to be honest, I can actually see them sort of being in that spot over the next 10 years, because they've got a lot of good youngsters. Fafita, Payne Haas, even guys like Flegler and that. are quite good. Katoni stacked. They have a lot of good youngsters who could be there in 10 years' time and could be some of the best players in the world at that point. It's just a matter of if they can retain them all, but it is the Broncos. They don't really lose too many players they want to keep. So, yeah, I'd expect the Broncos to be at least in the top 8, but definitely I think they're a chance of being in the top 4 in the next 10 years, that's for sure. But yeah, in terms of the rest of the ladder, it's anyone's game. I mean, we've seen with this one, it doesn't really reflect how things are in the last few years. I mean, the Dragons in at 10th, yeah, that's okay. But Canberra, they just played in the grand final, nearly won the grand final, and they find themselves in an 11th spot. Parramatta, probably one of the better teams going into 2020, you would think. And they find themselves in at 14th. Same can be said for Newcastle, a pretty strong team going into season 2020. They find themselves with a wooden spoon in this ladder. So I can definitely see things being a lot different. But who knows? It could be a matter of Parramatta have a good first few years, 2020, 2021, 2022, and then turn to shit again. We never really know. We don't really know, but I mean, that's the beauty of rugby league. That's also the beauty of the salary cap. As frustrating as it is sometimes, and we've seen some teams rot the salary cap. We've also seen some teams decimated by the salary cap, but it kind of makes things interesting and makes things kind of fresh. I mean, we saw the Roosters, as good as they were, the first team to go back-to-back since, I don't know, like the 2000s or like the 90s, something like that. I think it was the 90s, actually. So it just shows you salary cap does work to a degree. I mean, it doesn't work sometimes, but for the most part, I think it does work. Just keep things quite fresh and interesting, because we're not seeing the same teams every year. It's not like English soccer or even Spanish soccer, where you see just the top 2 or 3 teams just rotating the Premiership wins, because that's what it would be if there was no salary cap. We would see teams like the Roosters just have the God Squad. They've already got a great team. Imagine what it would be without an actual official salary cap. Anyway, guys, that was just a quick video, something that I thought I would talk about because I thought it was quite interesting. This, like I said, it's something that everyone kind of always thinks about. They go, oh yeah, well, my team was the best team of the last 10 years, or, you know, the Roosters have been pretty good, but are they better than the Storm? Is it better than the Storm's dynasty? Well, according to the ladder, no, it's not. Storm, the best team. But leave in the comment section below, do you think the Melbourne Storm have been the best team of the last 10 years, or do you think the Roosters eclipse them? Also, while you're at it, guys, go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. It's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke on YT. My Facebook page is also in the description as well. And go ahead and add me on Snapchat, same as what's on the screen, Mr. Luke on YT. Just go ahead and add me on that. You may as well. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to end this video. Enough rambling by me. Hopefully you did enjoy it, and I'll see you for my next video. Bye, guys.